screen for you. Yes. Is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So the poem is called Resume. Some of us pronounce it as Resume by Dorothy Parker. So before we get on to the poem, something about this lady, very, very plucky, very witty. She was so witty that she's known for some of her one liners. So, tit for tat, she would have a response for any situation or any a particular person. So, she was born in America. She was an American poet, not only a poet, she was an activist, a playwright, she was a critic, and also a visiting professor. So she was defined by her wit, and her commentary on the contemporary American society can be really scathing and burning. You know, she would not spare anyone. So sharp was her wit. And when you look at her personal life, you need to understand her personal life in order to appreciate the poem and the kind of lines that she has written. So early on, she lost her parents. She experienced quite many deaths around her. Her mother, later her stepmother, then her own father, then her uncle. Too many deaths for a child to handle. And then she even started writing poem at a quite young age. She had to support herself. But then God had gifted her with the gift of the gab. That is a way with language. She was quite good at language and quite witty. And then she started writing for magazines. She was a part of magazines like Vogue, the Vogue, that is fashion magazine. Then she joined the Vanity Fair. The Vanity Fair is one of the biggest, you could say, magazines that comes out of America. So she was part of Vanity Fair as an editor, reviewing drama. She worked there for some time, a couple of years, and she was fired from there. Why? Because she would not spare even the dramatist. So she would watch these drama, and then she would give the commentary. I mean, she had to write about it, reviews. She had to write the reviews, but the reviews used to be so scathing and not sparing anyone. Then, and her words were really razor sharp, because of which she lost the job. Meanwhile, she had married twice. Uh, the first marriage ended in divorce. um, he was a drunkard. I mean, she had a very upsetting kind of a married life. She was married for around 10 11 years to her first husband. The second one, that marriage, she married the second husband twice. She divorced him, and then again after 3 years they got married again. So more or less she was happy with this second husband. And then this pair, they went on to write scripts for movies in Hollywood. So they moved to Hollywood and they started writing scripts, and they became quite a successful pair writing scripts. So some of her famous movies is A Star Is Born. A Star Is Born is a very celebrated Hollywood movie. So she had written script for that. She was even nominated for the Academy Awards for that. So you can understand her caliber and the kind of success she had enjoyed during her lifetime itself. So though she was surrounded by this glamour, success, the colorful life all around, somewhere in her mind, she was unhappy. Maybe she belonged to the 1920s and 30s. You could call it the roaring 20s. When there was jazz parties, that kind of a high life. So she enjoyed all that. She was part of all that. But at the same time, there was this one part of her which really did not belong. So there were these bouts of depression wherein she tried to take her life. So she would go into these dull, dark phases in life, but then somehow she managed to come back. So her life has been a series of success, yes. Meeting with the high and mighty, being a part of the Hollywood crowd, reporting, writing about fashion, all this was there. But at the same time, she was quite unhappy also. And then she was quite friendly with her colleague, Mr. Robert Benchley, I believe. Yeah, he was also a poet. And then uh, just and her, this relationship was very special to her, though it was not an affair. I mean, they were best friends, but then her love for eventually was something, you could say, of epic proportions, that ultimate platonic love which people can only aspire for. So she had a very eventful life, had many affairs also, but then she learned quite a lot from these failed relationships, that how not to trust people, or there is a limit to which you can get on with a person, because even if you may get physical with someone, you if you don't have that mental compatibility, that spiritual, what do you say, partnership with that person, there's no point in that relationship. The relationship is bound to fail. So these are some of the takeaways from our life. And there was also a movie based on our life. I think it is called Parker and the Circle of Scan. I don't remember. Some, please, you can Google it and look for the title of the movie, based on her very very what do you call, momentous and rollicking life. All right. And then coming back to this poem, Resume, look at the title, Resume. When do we write resume? When we are looking for a job, right? When we are looking for a job and we are going to advertise ourselves, it's kind of an advertisement wherein we are telling prospective, prospective employers, we are good at all these things. So I'm this, I'm that, and I'm trying to impress that person, because what do I want? I want to impress somebody so that he or she may hire me, so that I may get a job. So that's the purpose of a resume. So resumes are always life affirming. They are usually positive, loaded with all kinds of positive words, wherein we are trying to brand ourselves as well as show ourselves as someone likable, someone employable, someone who can be counted upon, someone who can be an asset to a company, someone who can add to the economic productivity of a company. That's the reason we have resumes, and most of the resumes, they look very good, very attractive, impressive, and most of the time you could say, okay, there is a great deal of truth in them, but there are also people who simply uh, bluff. They claim things that they are not. So the very title can become a kind of a, you could say, an agenda for a person as to what he or she is trying to project to the world. We are not completely as we project ourselves in a resume. There may be things that we may have omitted. Maybe I don't get along well with people. I don't, I'm a loner. I'm not going to put that in my resume. Maybe I don't like teamwork and things like that. Maybe I feel very jealous of people who get ahead of me. But these things don't find a place in a resume. All right. So these are some of the things, underlying things we need to keep in mind. And then there is dark humor, because joking about death and life, it's always dark. There's dark humor. So it's kind of a comic poem, but then comic, and at the same time it shows that pain underneath, because death is never a comedy for those who are aspiring to it. That is, people with a death wish. Maybe in movies, or when you see somebody else doing all this, it may appear very funny. We may even laugh at it, but then the person who is undergoing that is not finding it comic and finding it funny. All right, so have a look at the poem. Razors pain you, rivers are damp, acids stain you, and rugs cause cramp. Guns aren't lawful, nooses give, gases smell awful. So you might as well live. So now she's giving this whole list. And what does this list tell us? It's about the different methods by which we can commit suicide. We can die. There's so many methods, n number of methods. You name it and it is there. So you have this plenty to choose from to die. Compared to that, living is another thing altogether. So now she's giving us all these options, and at the same time she's also telling you the side effects, or you could say the attached baggage that comes with each of these methods. So now if you're trying to use a razor to cut your vein and die, it's a very popular method of killing oneself. Razors, they're painful. So she has experienced many of these. We don't know exactly which ones she had tried out in her own life. So she had experienced quite a few of these, and then she's speaking from her own experience. So the problem with razors is that it will hurt you. You have to bear the pain. And now the second one, rivers are damp. That is, if you jump into a river and you want to drown yourself, provided you don't know swimming. And many times, if you know swimming, if you jump into water, your instinct would be to swim to safety. So you cannot really trust that also. So when you jump into a river, the rivers are very damp. It may be cold, and it's very uncomfortable. So it's not a very comfortable death. So that's the problem with river. You get all wet, you get all chilly, and then you try to get breath, that gasping wherein water enters your lungs and nose, mouth, and all. It's terrible. So rivers are damp, all wet and damp. So that's also not a very nice idea for committing suicide. What about acids? Acids stain you. That is, if you don't die and you drink acid or acid falls on you, they create stains on you which would never leave you. We have had enough movies on acid attack victims, right? So we know what acid can do to us. So they stain, they leave marks on you. They stain, and it's very, very painful. Acid is really horrible. So it will stain you. So this is also not a very good method. And what about drugs? You take drugs, you eat some sleeping pills, or you drink some kind of poison. They cause cramp. They cause cramp in the stomach. You drink anything poisonous, you get terrible stomach pain, terrible cramps. Cramps may be in the stomach, cramps in your whole body. Your muscles will twitch, and it would create a great deal of pain. So it will be a trauma, terrible pain before you die. And what about guns? Guns are not lawful. It's very difficult to get guns. And and if you are found with a gun, you would be charged, and then you would be put in prison. You need to go looking for a license, and you need to justify why you need guns. So it has a lot of headaches associated with owning guns. So guns are not lawful. Now what about nooses? Nooses give. Nooses are that rope you tie on something and then put around your neck, right? That is a noose. So you the rope that you put around your head and then you hang from the ceiling, that is a noose. Nooses give. That is, some many a times people tie these nooses onto the fans or something and they tie it around their neck. But then what happens? It may come off. It may become loose and you may end up falling down. So nooses give, as in nooses kind of open up, and many a times it loosens and the person falls down without the news serving its purpose. So it can become quite comic. Instead of tragedy, it can become comic, wherein you're falling off. Sometimes the fan may come down. These kind of things give. So nooses give. Nooses, that is, it can come off. It can become loose. And what about gases? You try to smell some kind of a gas, cooking gas or whatever. They smell really awful. That's so terrible that you don't feel like doing it. You have to bear with that dirty smell. You feel like puking. It's terrible. So gas, it smells awful. So look at all these things. All of them, they come with some problem or the other. All of them don't guarantee a very painless and comfortable death. There's always some kind of a side effect. And what if you don't die when you're using a particular method? You're going to live with that side effect, and it can have long lasting damages also, which can make your life a living dead, which can make your life terrible. So finally what you should saying, you might as well live. So rather than getting into all these difficulties, all these terrible methods, you might as well live. Living is much better than going through all these terrible pains, which does not really guarantee a painless and a peaceful death. So you might as well live. living is much better than these kind of attempts that we make on our own life. So it's kind of comic, but and at the same time it shows that underlying desperation, that there's the death wish is there, but then in order to fulfill that death wish you need to have a methodology which is perfect. The plan should be so perfect that you don't have to bear with the side effects and other problems that may come along with that particular attempt. And again, there's no guarantee that this is going to be perfect, sure shot, and you're going to get into the other world without much difficulty and pain. So you might as well live. So this is kind of a tongue in cheek conclusion. So rather than doing all this, you might as well live. That's much better than looking at death in this manner. So on the surface, it appears quite simple, but then it hides quite a lot of pain, depression, and darkness, because life is not that easy. And why do we talk about all these things? Why do we have that death wish? It's because life may have made us unhappy because of something or the other. You can have n number of reasons to be unhappy and to desire death. And how are you going to embrace death? There are all these facilities and all these methods available, but then there's some kind of, some or the other kind of problem with these methods. Again, there's no guaranteeing that these methods would ensure a proper transition, a happy transition from this life onto death.